Hi everyone, welcome again to my channel. Today we're going to talk about again all the strategies that the collective ego uses to keep us stuck in this game and to make us keep working and keep wanting to contribute to society, which is in the end the game we're talking about. And yeah, society is very helpful to everyone in a certain sense, but at the same time, for how it's built, it's not actually useful to us. We have this perception of things that make our life easier, but reality is that the collective ego is creating needs that we don't actually have in order for us to keep wanting to fulfill those needs. But those needs are not actually our real needs. And so in the end, for us to be able to contribute to this game that the collective ego created for us to perpetuate in itself, we have to basically abandon our real needs to completely fit in society and completely become just mere agents to perpetuate the collective ego. Today we don't realize we really are just slaves of the society, of this way of doing things that doesn't serve anybody anymore. And it's been going on for centuries at this point, but because now people are getting more and more educated thanks to the internet and thanks to social media that are destroying some of the barriers that the collective ego had created for centuries and for thousands of years. Now finally we are awakening to reality, and this is the matrix a lot of books and movies talk about. This is the type of matrix we have to awaken from. The game, as I explained in a previous video on machiavellism as well, is nothing else exactly than society and this need of climbing the ladder. So the game is basically this race for survival that we continuously are in every day, and we believe in every day, because that's the point. We believe we have to participate in this game because we believe that this is life. We did not understand that this is just a game that is being designed by the collectiveness of human beings through time, and now we're just perpetuating the system. The game has just the only goal of perpetuating itself, the system and the collective ego, and we're just mere players used throughout our lifetime in a turnover of human beings that are born and raised into the matrix. For real, this is a real matrix. When people talk about the movie The Matrix, that is reality. It's just an analogy, a metaphor used to describe what a real society is. And most of the times it's not just something that we perceive directly, because sometimes we are born and raised in a country where that is maybe less capitalistic, and so we are as a nation used by capitalistic countries, for example, or by narcissistic nations, or sometimes we are born inside the matrix so much that we don't see that anymore, and so we are incapable of getting out. And so the reason why I have awakened to this situation was because I come from a non-narcissistic country, and I've been trying to climb the ladder towards very narcissistic workplaces and very narcissistic lobbies and elites and situations and nations. And because of that, now I have all this knowledge, because I can see the difference, because I wasn't born in it. And that's why I can see that. And that's why a lot of people, and minorities especially, are usually the ones that see the matrix a lot more than people that are instead born in it, and at this point are just enslaved to this situation, to this game. The very first strategy that the collective ego uses to keep us in the game, to make us participate in the game, is what I call the Cinderella story. The Cinderella story is basically nothing else than giving us, through TV, through social media, through news, stories of successful people that show us that it's feasible. But those stories are always invented, in the sense that those people are just real trophies or just portrayed that way. But it's whatever story is presented is just a story, because really unhappy or very unaware of what is going on, and that the fact that the collective ego is in fact just using them, and they also are victims as well, and they are just used for us to believe that we can do that, that we can reach that point, so that we start climbing and raising. But because it's not feasible, and only few people are actually either selected on purpose by elites and lobbies and even secret societies as perfect trophies for the collective ego to become an example for us to follow. So they're picked on purpose. People that become famous are usually somewhat picked. And if people actually get there by themselves, they do it by making so many compromises, so many changes in their real values and their real purposes in life, that most of the times they just are completely drained and destroyed when they get there. It's not by chance that there is the story of the curse of the 27, 28 years suicide, like Kurt Cobain, like Amy Winehouse, a lot of other celebrities fall into that same category. People that once they reach the peak of success, they just die. And why? Because they see that they're just mere trophies that the system uses and abuses, and they can't stand it because they're too young and too lonely at that point to understand. And that is actually beautifully portrayed also in A Star is Born, for example. So this is the Cinderella story, but the Cinderella story also has another side that we don't see until we try to pursue that path. And if you have seen the Walt Disney movie cartoon, The Cinderella, you understand what I mean. Cinderella is just every one of us that tries to climb the ladder and to reach whatever position in society. However, the system, which is basically the stepmother and the sisters, the collective ego, which is basically narcissistic, just gives us goals and things to achieve and puts us limits and rules, but they all are designed like the stepmother and the stepsisters of Cinderella designed her "you can go to the ball" kind of thing. Yeah, you can go to the ball, but you have to first clean all the house and clean everything. So they make it possible for Cinderella. They tell Cinderella, yeah, it's possible for you to actually get what you want, which is going to the ball, for example. But you have to do all these things first, and you have to meet all these regulations and all these rules. But all those things are made and designed on purpose for Cinderella to not be able to actually go to the ball. So if she goes to the ball in the movies, just thanks to a help from like magic thinking, things that never actually happen. So the point is that Cinderella doesn't know from the start. She is good inside, and so she truly believes that whatever the stepmother and stepsisters are telling her it's true. You can go to the ball. And she's like, oh, she's hyped. Like, yeah, cool, I can go to the ball. That's amazing. I'm going to give my best for me to actually be able to go to the ball. But reality is that they had designed the whole game from the start for her to not actually be able. So it's just a fake promise, a fake carrot that they're giving to her for her to invest in this thing and to waste her time. And it's a really sadistic game in the end, which is what the ego does, the collective ego does. It's just a sadistic game for us to keep perpetuating the system. But for us to keep perpetuating the system, we need to have a carrot. Otherwise, nobody will work. Nobody will do anything. So we need to have this carrot. And this carrot is represented by all the Cinderella stories that we are presented with every day, which are completely fake, invented. Not because those people never actually reach the peak, but because that peak is an empty thing. It's empty. It's just a position, a trophy position. All those people are either drug addict, either alcoholic, either they reach that spot and they don't even know how because they're just their parents brought them there. And the very few people that reach that spot in a real way are very few. And in the end, some of them are suicidal. Some of them have to reach real bad mental states, to the point of mental illnesses and depression. And it's not by chance that now today a lot of, for example, comedians have this collective purpose of showing people reality, showing people that behind whatever success they achieve, there is mental illness, which it's definitely something to talk about, but it's not normal. Please do not take it as it is normal to have mental illness. Mental illness is an illness, and you should not have it. Because a person has a mental illness means is under a normal amount of stress. A mental illness is just a symptom that our mind gives us to tell us your body is not in good health, even though you can't perceive it. Stress is the silent killer. So definitely we cannot aim at having and developing mental illness just to reach something, because if you reach the point of having a mental illness, it's not you anymore. So you, as you today, have not reached that spot. A different you, which is ill, has reached that spot, and that you should not exist, and that you is not you. So you have actually failed at reaching your goals if you reach those goals by becoming ill. Second strategy that the collective ego uses to keep us in this Cinderella story and to keep us going is giving us the idea of failure. The idea that we have to reach our goals, and if we do not reach those goals that we had decided from the start or that society had given us, we are a failure. We have failed. And so this means that we have the perception that if we start a certain career path and we, in the middle of the way of the path, we realize that there's something wrong, that what we were thinking we were trying to achieve that actually doesn't exist, then giving up will correspond to failing, to being a failure, to being a shame for our family, for ourselves, for our kids, for our parents or our friends, right? And so that idea of failure is totally wrong, because failure doesn't mean you haven't achieved your goals. Failure means you have failed at your purpose in life. You are creating pain, you are creating suffering, you are suffering. You are not making the world a better place than how you found it, but you are actually making it a worse place. You are contributing to someone else's, the collective ego, goals instead of actually pursuing your own. So that is failure, right? Failing at doing something that in fact you're not doing, because you realized through time that what you thought you were pursuing was not real, because there's no way for you to know from the start that what you're trying to pursue is not real until you try to pursue it and you face reality and you realize that there is a Truman Show all put up for you to fall in the trap, but it's not an actual thing. Until you see that, there's no way for you to know it. And so that, like, giving up when you understand that what you were trying to pursue doesn't exist is not failure, is actually not wanting to be delusional. Because if you try to pursue something that doesn't exist, you're just idealizing reality, and so you're just delusional, right? And so you don't want to be delusional. That's what you don't want to be. But failure at doing those things is not a real failure. So the idea of failure is something that is instilled in us by society, by school, by the school system, by education, by our parents, because our parents in the end, for most part, are unaware and not awakened as well, because this is the new generations are starting to figure it out. And so, yes, failure is not a real thing. Third strategy that the collective ego uses to keep us stuck in the game, and that contributes to the previous 2 points, is actually the idea of stereotypes and the need for belonging to a certain category of people. And I'm talking about any sort of the fact that for you to feel like you have an identity, you have to belong to certain type of people. Like, you're an alternative kind of person, you're more intellectual, you're a nerd, all these words and categories. You're a party girls, you're, princess, all these categories of potential categories. They're like a lot of categories, of course, and very subtle. And today we have a very well developed in a bad way, unfortunately, and diversified type of population, where we do think there are all these stereotypes, and if we do not belong to any of them, if we do not homologate, if we do not become like a stereotype. And what is a stereotype? A stereotype is not a person. A stereotype is someone that meets the expectations of society, so that society and the collective ego has an easier job to do in trying to connect with us and to understand us, because we fall into a very specific stereotype, which is not us. We're just falling in the trap or of putting ourselves in a box that is easy to catalog, and that is easy to handle for the collectiveness, for the collective ego. So this need is actually due to peer pressure, because the whole masses, the masses of people are brainwashed since young age by the collective ego. And unfortunately, because most of us are actually born enlightened, all of us are actually born enlightened. We are born still. We are born that we are awakened already. But because we don't know, we don't have that self-confidence of being able to impose ourselves and impose our enlightenment, and we don't know what enlightenment is, the collectiveness, the collective ego, has to manipulate us and has to make us feel guilty or bad, or has to make us lose self-esteem and to second guess ourselves, and to make us feel like we do not belong unless we homologate, unless we start belonging to a certain very specific category of people, so that the collectiveness has an easier job to handle us. That's it. And so falling into a stereotype is actually the worst thing you can do to yourselves, because you are not a box. You are a person, and you are different than anyone else, but at the same time you already are awakened. You already know that all this game doesn't make any sense, and we go through 20 years of forceful education, basically, because it's mandatory to go to school. And yes, of course, it's important to go to school. The problem is the school system that is meant to create sheep, is meant to create employees, is meant to create codependent people that then can be useful to the collectiveness, to the collective ego. And so we are born awakened, and we go through a brainwashing for 20 years of school, where we are told to be in a certain way, and we're put in a corner every time we do not follow the rules, or we do not fall in a specific stereotype. Every time our teachers, that are also themselves brainwashed most of the times, or if they're not brainwashed, they're forced by the system to act in a certain way, and they're kicked out of like education unless they fall in stereotypes as well, and they follow the rules as well, and they follow the guidelines. So this whole system is just designed for us to think, to believe we have to fall into stereotypes, and we have to belong to a certain category of people. Reality is that is just a very that is just a way for the collective ego to put us into a very specific category, so that we are easy to handle in general. Because otherwise, if we're all different, it's difficult to sell to us. It's difficult to create products for us. It's difficult to manipulate us. It's difficult to understand our psychology. If you're all different, if you're all aware, if you're all awakened, it's very difficult to have a grasp on whatever we want, and to create needs that we don't have, because we are not manipulable. And so this is just a strategy that the collective ego is being using since forever. And every time a new technology, a new thing is evolved and developed, the problem is that the collective ego, that has so much power at this point, just turns it into something that he can use against us, unless we are aware, we are awakened. If suddenly today all population on the planet awakened, there will be no collective ego anymore, because collective ego is nothing else than the sum of all the egos of the people. Unfortunately, though, it's mostly the ego of the elites and of the lobbies and people that are in power, and that are all pathological narcissists for most part, and because they are victims of their ego, which then creates the collective ego, in fact. Fourth strategy that the collective ego uses to keep us stuck in the game is social status. Social status is an invented concept that the collective ego invented for us to have levels. Like in a game, he created this game where there are different levels that we can climb, because the mind likes challenges, and so we get tricked by this idea of all these levels, and so we start climbing the ladder thinking, okay, I want to achieve this level, and then the next level, and then the next level. And social status represents nothing else that the steps of this ladder in society that we're trying to climb. However, social status is just a real empty concept, because the happiest people are actually the ones that are the basis of this pyramid of the social status, because they are present, they are aware, they are surrounded by their family, they do not compromise their values, their integrity, and their family life and themselves to climb the ladder, while people that are on top of the ladder have to compromise their values, and they're surrounded by sharks, and they have to maintain this mask for them to be able to deal with all the sharks they're surrounded with, and also they can get stabbed anytime soon, and so they also always are in their fight or flight mode. And so that is not a happy life, for several reasons that I will explain in my next videos, when I'm going to talk about the neurological side and aspect of being abused by the narcissistic society and by the collective ego. And so social status is just an invented concept. However, what keeps people in their social status is the fear of shame in case they fall from the ladder, they fall from that step to a lower step. Because for you to be able to stay in a certain social status, and I have been climbing the ladder in my own field and in society as well, and I've met a lot of these people, like very high top level VIPs and famous people, and I can tell you it's all empty. It's all really a very bad environment. It's really like cold, and people try to exploit each other all the time, and it's not a happy life, even though it seems happy because they have money and they have this appearance of peacefulness because they don't have to look for money. Reality is that they are continuously in their fight or flight mode because they fear falling from that step. They fear having to decrease their social status, not having money, not having access to those things anymore. They have all these false needs that are not real needs, because if you don't have pretty things around you, it's not that you're not surviving, you're still alive, right? If you don't have expensive clothes, you're still alive. So it's a perceived fear for survival. It's not a real fear for survival. And so also they are afraid because there is this whole pressure of belonging to that social status at that point, because in case you fall from there, you know that all the people that you have left at that level are all sharks, and they're all very mean people. And so in the end, you know already, because you can see how people that fall from the step, because that happens all the time, people that lower their social status are smear campaigned by all those previous so-called friends. And so you know what happens to people that fall from that ladder. And so people live constantly in the fear of falling from the ladder because they see what happens to who falls from the ladder. And we see stories, as well as this is the other side of the coin of the Cinderella story, because in the Cinderella story you have a trophy that the collective ego poses there for you, puts there for you to follow, while in the social status strategy you have bad examples of people that fall from there. People like, for example, Epstein and all these people that fall from the, like, reach their peaks. Trump is another example. People that reach their peaks and then they're completely destroyed by the collective ego are just examples of What happens to people that do not follow the rules, that do not comply with society, that are not compliant with with the regulations, that do not pretend, that do not keep a mask on? And we have plenty of examples in the theaters. And now we recently had example of Will Smith, for example. If you like, it's crazy that we live in a society where that guy is a poor victim with PTSD of a narcissist, of a cover narcissist. And in cinema and in the Oscar thing, we have a lot of people that are most of the times abusers. We have stories of people that abuse victims of the Me Too movement and stuff like that, that abuse people in order to give them jobs. And it's like this everywhere, but nobody talks about that, because otherwise it's persecuted by society and by the collective ego. And who gets punished is someone that slaps someone on TV. It's bad, it's violence, but at the same time, we are punishing over narcissists that are just victims of covert abuse. And the covert abuse is completely left to happen continuously. So this is the Truman Show. This is just a fake system, and everybody has to pretend, because reality is we are at this point just led by covert narcissists everywhere. And this is the collective ego I'm talking about. So we see all the time these stories of people that if they don't keep the mask on, if they don't comply with the regulations and with the rules in a way that sometimes is just nonsense, or sometimes people are people, they can have reactions also on TV. That doesn't mean that they have to be public shamed, or like, let's have a dialogue here, let's talk. This whole idea that we have to punish people that do not comply with the rules, instead of talking to them and trying to rehabilitate them and to cure them, that's the problem, because that creates the fear of falling, and the fear of falling creates dependency, and dependency creates needs, and those needs are used to leverage on us by the collective ego. The fifth strategy is the illusion of free will. The illusion of free will is when in society we have this perception that we actually live in a democracy and we can do whatever we want. And that is just a manipulation, because in the end we have seen it for years, at this point for centuries, that is not true. Like, the illusion of democracy is when you're presented with the choice Hillary Clinton or Trump, and you're like, honestly, I don't know which one is the worst. And believe me, because I am one of those, there are a lot of good people in the world that want to do good things, but they're kicked out for you to only have bad options. And so basically, the illusion of free will is when people that climb the ladder, or things that are presented to you, are supposedly two choices you can choose from. Reality is that the whole system to get to those two choices, it's so wrought that those two choices are already chosen for you, basically, so you don't have any choice. So good people exist and they try to do good every day, but they're either smear campaigned, kicked out of the system, killed by the system, or brought to the point of mental illness and suicide, kicked out from the system in so many different ways, from sending them to prison to making them ill to making them become homeless. And this is what we're talking about. Good people exist, but the collective ego doesn't want for them to go in power. Like, we're also talking about making people waste so much time and resources and having so much stress that they don't have kids. And if you don't have kids, you can't accumulate wealth and become an elite as well, because wealth is, unfortunately, because of all the obstacles that the collective ego poses to us, the only way to accumulate wealth is this turnover of people by, you have kids and then you can teach your know-how to your kids, and then your kids already know and they can go a step further and then a step further. And this is how an elite is created. And so the collective ego avoids for people to have kids and to be successful in society, so they don't have the chance to raise to the top, and they don't have the chance to get to you, to become a choice for you. And so it's up to you to actually avoid this problem. You can decide every day to adopt a warrior, to fund people that you believe are promising from the start. And this is what we should do honestly. Like, start funding people that are empathetic and good, and start giving them the chance. Start investing our money into them so that they, even though the collective ego tries to push them away, they are instead supported by their surroundings anyways. Hope you enjoyed this video, and let me know in the comments if you want to hear anything specific.